Hey, welcome to the Lifestyle Creation Podcast, designing life on your terms. I'm your host, Jamie Thurber, and I'm an expert operations manager, productivity queen, mindset, business, and lifestyle coach. Basically, getting shit done is my jam. And I believe in the power of intentional living and in real conversations that can shift your perspective, create habits, and ultimately achieve the freedom that you want in every area of your life. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the podcast. Wherever you are, take a big deep breath. And let out a big loud exhale. It just makes you feel better, sinks you back into your body. I do that often these days, and people around me are like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Why? They're like, "Well, you just like exhaled so loud." I'm like, "Oh no, it's just no, I'm good." Like, it's not a bad thing. So I always tell people about it. I'm like, trust me, just try that. It makes you feel so much better. But anyways, I am sitting here with the pups and both of them today. So hopefully they both be quiet and let us, talk about what we want to talk about. And you guys know that I am a firm believer in messages and things kind of come to me when they need to. And ideas are shown to me in order to talk about them, I feel like. And so it's funny because this is what I'm going to talk about today is something that I have dealt with for years. I would say a really long time, especially once I started my business and I was working from home, it became a thing. And I want to say, I'm going to talk about all sides of the spectrum, but then, it had just recently happened and I was talking with a client about it because it had, it was a thing with her. And then I saw this whole little meme or whatever the heck you want to call it on the internet that just brought it. It was like a whole conversation of this guy, like, can we please stop doing this as a society? And I was like, okay, I hear you, universe. Like, I hear you. I'm going to talk more about it. I was going to write about it and I probably still will, but I figured it was a good topic here for the podcast. So basically, in our society these days, we have this like need for instant gratification, right? Like there's this constant contact thing that goes on, right? And it's really interesting because there's a whole lot of hypocritical behavior going on when it comes to that. And what I mean is, people complain about others having their phones on them too much or being on their phone too much. And then they're not being present, right? Like they're not paying attention. They're not being present. And then on the other side of that, then people will bitch and moan about you not responding promptly or not answering the phone when they called or whatever. And it's just like this really sick and twisted little circle that has become really acceptable apparently in our society. And I don't fully understand. I do actually fully understand. So I'm going to just break this all down from like a habitual level to psychology to attachment. Like this is, like I said, this is something that's been happening to me for a really long time. And it's something that I have spent a lot of time observing. And I think it's time for me to share this with everyone. So I hope that this is helpful, no matter where you are on the spectrum of what I'm going to explain. And I think that we've all played both parts. I think that that's a big thing too, is when we talk about, pieces or things that we want to change. I think sometimes we have to make sure that we're putting enough effort, or not effort, but just attention into the fact that like, we're not perfect either, So that is my little intro, my little groundwork that we're laying there. And so basically the thing is that there is an attachment to our cell phones, right? There is an attachment to having something in our hand that tells us where to go if we need it to. It looks up an answer to a question. It can directly put us in contact with anyone for the most part. It's, great for emergencies, blah, 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 all of those things. There's a lot of benefits, right, to having a phone. There's also a lot of things that we, like habits and things that we do or that we used to do and which used to be normal to us that we don't necessarily learn anymore because of the phone in our hand situation, right? And so examples, I remember several years ago, I was in Utah and I was spending the day by myself going up into the mountains. I was going up into Park City and Sundance, and I was super excited. And I had rented this car, and I looked like the map. There was this trail or this road that kind of looped all the way up, and then it came back down, and that was where I was going to go. But there was a certain park I was going to, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I get to the park. I have no service, right? And then so I'm sitting there going, holy crap. Am I grateful that my dad explained to me how to read a freaking map, right? And I was able to see the map, but it wasn't moving. You know how when you're using the GPS, usually like it moves as you move. So I was able to see what the road looked like, what directions it was supposed to go, and just kind of follow what I saw on that image or on that picture, and able, to navigate my way out without freaking out, without having to go back. Like, that was the other thing. I didn't want to turn around and go back the way I had come. I wanted to finish my little journey. And the other thing was, I was like, you know what? If I get lost, like, I'll figure it out. I'll find a way down from this mountain. It'll be fine. But that was one of those instances that I realized, I'm like, man, I'm so glad that I grew up in a time, like, yes, I've had a phone since I was, 17 maybe, something like that. But like, I got to learn a lot of really useful survival tips, basically, before having a phone in your hand, at 10 years old was a thing, and having that to be something that you depend on. So, okay, so sorry for that crunching in the background. Welcome to having a Mac in your life. I didn't even think about it just because I'm so used to how loud he is. He decided to have his breakfast while we were recording. So anyway, I'm very grateful, like I said, for being able to, be in that middle generation. I'm in that strange place where, like, technically, I guess, in a way you could refer to me as a millennial, but I'm in that weird age range where it's like I'm in between two, quote unquote, Jesus Christ, there he goes again. My God, you guys, welcome to my life. We're just going to leave this one as is today, too. I'm going to tell Tiffany not to edit out any of this nonsense. So, keeping it real, friends, keeping it real. Anyway, so I'm in that strange generation that's kind of in between a couple of them. And so, which I'm grateful for because I have some of the best qualities of both, which is nice. Anyway, but the biggest thing about the phones that's happened is a lot of people have kind of lost the idea that people aren't required to be at your beck and call. They're not required to be on the same schedule as you. They're not required to be available when you're available. They're not required to answer you immediately. They're not required to answer you at all, to be very honest. Like, think back in the day when we had a phone that was attached to the wall in our houses, and that was it. I know, like, when I was growing up, we had an answering machine. So, people would call, they leave a message, and then you'd call them back when you got home. And if they weren't available, then, that's just how it was, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And then moving forward, though, through today, it's increased into this way that's really unhealthy, into this state that's extremely unhealthy, because if we call someone and they don't answer the phone, there's like an attachment thing there that we're like, well, what the hell? Or we immediately we go into these other states of mind because of that. A lot of people do, I should say. I don't mean everyone, but a lot of people do. And it just creates this strange dependency, I should say. I remember even when I originally had a cell phone and you could call, and I think there was a voicemail on it at the time, but nobody was like that then either. We were teenagers. Like, we weren't like, oh my God, they didn't answer. What the fuck, anyways, so, I just taking you through a little bit of a timeline, I guess I should say, about how we've evolved as a society with these devices in our hands everywhere we go, right? So it's become a thing, and I think that, if you pay attention to social media, or, especially if you're in the world of self-help or trying to develop you as a better human, which you probably are, you wouldn't be listening to this, there's a lot of concepts around being present. I've talked about it several times here on the podcast. It's definitely a regular part of my teachings. And it's being present in the moment, listening to people when they're talking to you, not being distracted, those types of things, and noticing what's going on around you. Like, that's a huge part of mindfulness. But when you bring it into the whole hypocritical side is that people are like, oh, you don't even pay attention, or you need to be present, or you need to do this. And so then maybe that person changes. Like I was in that spectrum before, especially when I first started my business, I was on my phone entirely too much. My boyfriend used to get so mad at me. It was a big deal, actually. That's actually a really long conversation, but and I would get a little defensive and whatever, but I realized, you know what, he's right. Like, this is silly. Like, I should not be on this that much. It was due to bad boundaries, right? But the problem is with most people, and he was never like this, but with most people is they give you shit for being on your phone too much. So then you work on not doing that, to where you're like, maybe you're hanging out with a friend and your phone's in your pocket or it's in your purse and you didn't even touch it one time. But then that same person calls you and you don't answer and they're pissed at you. And you're like, well, what the fuck? Like, I can't win. You want me to be more present in my conversations and in my world, but then I don't, because I am being present, then I don't answer the phone. And then you're like losing your shit, right? But that's the world. That's kind of the twisted pieces of the world that we live in. And I believe that we get caught up in those stories because nobody talks about it, right? Like, nobody's having this conversation in the way that I plan on having it the rest of this podcast. People just don't talk about it, that it is really hypocritical, and that it is like the person who's like, well, you didn't answer, needs to check themselves for real. Like, you need to think, wait a minute. Like, why do I believe that person needs to be readily available to me at all times? That's the thing. Like, that's the piece, is that there's an assumption being made across the board that we're entitled to anyone's attention 24/7. That having a phone apparently means that you are available to anyone, anytime, whenever they decide they need you. And that's really just not the case. Truthfully, that's not healthy for anybody. I've lived really deep in the spectrum of people pleasing, or shall I say being available constantly to everyone. What that would look like for me was I would be having text message conversations with several people all day long. I would be answering several phone calls. I would be, returning several voicemails all day long. And here's the deal. My job requires me to be extremely present. It requires me to be very grounded and be very okay within my own body in order for me to help other people, right? Like, I have to keep my shit straight in my brain and have, be focused and have energy in that capacity so that I can help my clients, so that I can write, so I can create and be clear in my messages that I'm sharing in the way that I'm showing up. Like, that's a crucial part of my business. And so for me to be giving, all my all into doing that for my job, so I can be really good at my job and, make money to pay my bills. And then also then have this side of me where I'm answering every single person the moment that they message me, right? And I think that there comes, especially with business owners, there comes this, like, when you first get started, especially, you have this fear that you're going to miss a sale, right? You're going to miss a sale. You're going to miss an opportunity, so you better answer that person right away. You better answer them in the moment. Here's the deal. Maybe that's the case in some instances. Maybe it is. I'm sure somebody somewhere can give me several examples of how, if I didn't answer right away, I would have lost the opportunity. I personally don't choose to live that way, and I really don't think that should be the norm, because in most cases it's not. Like, especially if we're talking about business, like, if somebody is messaging you about doing a promotion or doing, a podcast interview, or doing an affiliate marketing thing, or wanting to do photo shoots, or wanting to interview you for something, or wanting to have an interview with you to be their client, whatever it is, if you don't answer within a split moment, if that person's really the kind of person that's serious that you want to do business with, like, they're not going to go run to the other side of the world and never respond to you again. Like, sure, there's a pain point there, or there's not a pain point. There's a window of response time, but instantly, no. There's two reasons that that's not necessary. Number one, it establishes firsthand a really unhealthy expectation. So you teach people how to treat you. And this is something that I had to learn the hard way, but now something I teach my clients, is that if the moment that somebody asks you a question every single time, especially in the business standpoint, if you drop everything you're doing, no matter what time of day, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, if you drop everything and respond to that message every single time, especially like straight out the gate, then that is the expectation that they have from you. So then when you decide to put boundaries in place later, because you're like, I can't fucking do this anymore, like I did, right? Like I can't do this. Like everyone am constantly having all these conversations. And here's the side note, not that I don't enjoy that. Like, it's not that I don't enjoy talking to my friends all day, or because they're hilarious. Let's be real. Like, my girlfriends are so funny. Like, we could just laugh our asses off all day long, you know, and we can talk about everything. That's great. It's not that I don't enjoy that, but it's just that, like, it was unrealistic for me to think that I could do all of those things and then also be mentally, emotionally healthy. And I'll explain more about that in a second. But basically what I'm getting at though is that, like, when you have this attachment to that instant response, and you have to start, if you start out the gate with that and that person expects that of you, and then later you change your tune, there's an odd balancing act that goes on to where they're not necessarily, it's an adjustment period, because people, when you shift and to something they're not used to, it causes a lot of feelings in that person and questions and all that stuff. So again, I have a podcast episode, I'll link it below, about boundaries, and that kind of explains a little bit more in depth how you then explain your boundary to this person as you shift it, and then have the patience, stand firm in it, but also have the patience for them to get on board, which, again, whole other conversation. Check out that podcast below. And I think it's one of those that I think everyone should listen to multiple times, because it's something that we do on different levels over and over again. So it's really helpful. But anyways, so why is it such a problem for us to be constantly connected, or expecting, or believing it's right that we have an instant response from anyone? So the thing is, when you have it's an unhealthy attachment to an instant response, what that does is two things. It's filling a void, most likely in most people's instances, like, where it's validating them. Like, it's validating you when somebody answers you promptly on your timeline. It's also feeding that inner control freak. It's feeding that part of you who's arrogant enough to think that you have the ultimate control, not only of yourself, but of what other people are doing and thinking, and that they should stop what they're doing to answer you right now, because you're in the state of mind where you need that response. Unless you're paying them, you can't expect that. And honestly, even when you are paying them, you still can't fully expect that unless, like, that's your agreement. That would be like me saying to Tiffany, who's my assistant, hey, you didn't answer me within 15 minutes when I texted you last night, and being, like, pissed about it. And it's like, no, guess what? Like, she has a life, and she's not required to answer me 24/7. Like, is there an opportunity, like, when we're in a launch and we're in the middle of something, may that be necessary? Sure. And guess what? I'm going to pay her more during that, and I'm going to express those expectations to make sure that she can meet them. That's the other part, is like, man, we have this weird imbalance of explaining what it is that we need with each other. So not only is it that attachment, unhealthy attachment to the instant response, seeking some sort of validation, and also this arrogance to an extent in some cases too, but it's also that validation piece goes a little deeper. If when somebody doesn't answer you, you are worried that they're mad at you instantly, or you jump to conclusions, or you make a ton of assumptions as to why they didn't immediately answer you, like, that's your shit. That's not theirs. And you guys, I'm bringing this up because, like, I could literally list you right now off the top of my head 20 different instances in 20 different, totally, different types of people in my life that I've experienced this with, where I've had to be like, whoa. Like, that's a story you're telling yourself, and that's not mine to bear. But in the past, I would. In the past, I would feel so guilty and so obligated to then meet this unrealistic expectation that this person has of me that, quite honestly, isn't mine to meet. If somebody gets upset and feels, and they start questioning basically their own value, their own worth, those things based off of a lack of timely response, or, whatever it may be, like, that's theirs, and to an extent it makes me sad because I want to help everyone. Like, I want to be like, hey, let me explain to you like how you can start soothing that within yourself, because that's the healthy way to adapt to this. And if you adapt to that and you start explaining like that's an unhealthy attachment, you start rewriting and reprogramming your own belief system within yourself, then you're no longer, reliant on everyone around you to make you feel okay with those types of responses. Like, I get these instances where people, boy, oh boy, people will reach out to me and say, hey, I'm just checking on you. How are you doing? And dude, in some instances, that's exactly what they're looking for. But in more cases than not, when I quit falling bait to that, and here's why. I would be like, you know what, I'm good, or you know what, I'm not great. Like, this is going on, and thank you for checking on me. Like, here's the thing. And then, dude, the moment I respond, it's, yeah, and then I have this problem, and blah, blah, blah. And they go down the rabbit hole of what their original actual reasoning for texting me was. It's like they're baiting me, right? I get baited by like, oh, I care about you, I'm checking on you, but let me then tell you all about my things, because I didn't really care about what you had to say anyways. Like, have you ever been around a person, and, it happens way more in person, I feel like, too, where somebody's like, how are you? And then you start to respond, and they, like, just start talking about something else. You're like, cool, so you didn't even give a shit how I am, so why did you ask me? But it's because we're so conditioned in this weird place that, again, we're not present, we're not paying attention to what we're saying, we're not listening, we're not engaged in our, communications, and it's just this big, ugly thing. And it goes across the board in so many places. But I digress on that. Anyways, back to the statement of the unhealthy attachment, right? And that expectation. How that expectation creates anxiety for us. Like, if it feeds anxiety, it creates the stress within us. And I think the more that we acknowledge that, the bigger this transition, or even just listening to this can be for you. It's like, man, I get anxiety. I have anxiety, okay? Like, I understand how it's a beast, and sometimes it just, like, takes over. The other part of that, though, is that, like, in order to really get some sort of a handle on it, you can't always count on other people to explain or to soothe that. So, like I said before, I really want to soothe everyone. I want to just be able to make them feel better. But I know personally, like, and with my experience in clients and stuff, that's not actually really helpful. Like, it doesn't really fix anything. And so just a real quick side note, one of the things that I go to in those moments where I'm like, oh my God, like something, whatever. If you go to those moments of, oh my God, something happened and they're mad at me, blah, blah, blah. You go back to fact and fiction in your head. You're like, wait a minute. Okay. What really happened? What's the fact here? And what story am I telling myself? And then you're able to really differentiate between what's the truth of actually going on and what's not. Sometimes that's a really difficult thing to do, but it is definitely the thing that's gotten me through the majority of my self-healing. And still I use that tactic, to this day when my brain gets ahead of me and I start telling stories and I'm like, wait a minute. What's the truth? What's the story? What's the fact and what's the fiction? Like, I use that within myself more than anything else. And that's something that if you're doing that with you, you're then learning ways to deal with these feelings. So this isn't going to be a long conversation about anxiety treatments. But what I wanted to say too is around the like, hey, this is how I, expect what I expect from you in responses or whatever. Like, it's really selfish. Like, it's also really selfish to make assumptions and not put into, thought of what that other person's life might be, right? Like, here's a great example. All of my friends have babies, okay? All of them, multiple babies. The girls that I've been friends with for 25 years, they all have babies. It would be so selfish and unrealistic of me to expect them to answer my text messages the moment that I send them, or, stop what they're doing with their kids to get on the phone with me anytime, like their lives are chaotic and they're running to several soccer games and they're, have jobs and households and husbands. Like that would be selfish of me to expect that of them. Now, what I also want you to know is for many years, I put that into super perspective for myself, but I allowed other people to think that because I don't have a house full of kids, that then I should be available to them all of the time because I don't have a house full of kids. And you know what? That's also not true. Doesn't like the kids thing is an easy example, right? But that doesn't mean that if you don't have, children, that you should just be at everyone's beck and call. Like that's not the case either. I was just using these as examples, but I just wanted to give you that permission there too, to know that it doesn't matter if you have 12 kids or no kids. Like for someone to expect that of you is still very selfish, and it's not wrong of you to take care of you first. Like that's at the end of the day. I mean, let's go back to tale as old as time, right? You must fill your own cup. Like you must be okay first. Otherwise you're doing no one a service, to be honest. Like then that's even selfish of you, honestly, of you to do that. So within these expectations too, if you're like clinging to what other people may do or not do, you're not really giving yourself the time, the space, or opportunity to acknowledge or address your own shit. Like at all. It also doesn't give anybody else the chance to really show up for you. Like I'll tell you what, I went through that too in a deep way. I'm like, nobody ever chooses me. Like I'm not a priority in anyone's life. And what I realized was those feelings were very valid, but I created that monster, and I created it by always giving instruction or answering or calling first or doing like I was in control of the situation instead of sitting back and letting the other person respond to me or show up for me. Because, that tactic, a lot of us have that fear, that survival tactic in our brains and in our subconscious, because it's kind of scary to sit back and let somebody show up for you, because what if they don't? What if they don't? That might hurt. So that's why we don't do it. But it's rewarding. It's so rewarding, and it clears so much of the muck, and it clears so much of the anxiety and the nonsense out of the way when you can train yourself to stop forcing people basically into these types of, acknowledgments or responses or whatever, and just allow them to show up for you. Like that's a really rewarding thing, and that feels really good, and it starts to take the power away from some of these demons that we create in our heads when we allow people to show up. We give ourselves that space to be like, wait a minute, like this is my shit. They have a life too, or whatever, and just allow that space. So that's a big part of it. So a part of running an online, here's the other thing I want to say about social media. So this is a thing, and I can tell you what, it makes my head like, I just shake my head every time. But this is a thing that happens a lot to my clients and my friends I have conversations with regularly. Like I've established it pretty clear to people in my life after, all these years, that if you see me post on social media, or you see my little green light on, which actually I turned my green light off on Facebook, but they won't let me do it on Instagram. But that does not mean I'm ignoring you and I'm playing on the internet. First of all, some people they're allowed to scroll on social media without responding to your message. Like that's acceptable. And that does not mean they hate you. That does not mean that you did something wrong. That means that they don't have the capacity right now to respond to your text. And that's okay. So, but what social media has created is this attachment piece, right? Where we think, oh, their green light's on, or they liked someone else's comment, or they did this, they must be ignoring me because I see them on the internet all the time. And I'll tell you what, I've gotten jabbed with that so many times because I own an internet-based business. Like I post on all the social channels all the time. And I've had people say to me, well, you're always on the internet. Well, first of all, that's my job. Second of all, it's all very strategic. Like a lot of those things, well, I'd say maybe 50-50 of what you're seeing is pre-scheduled. Like I write things and then have a little timer in my phone that goes off and it says post to Instagram. I hit this button, it copies and pastes what I wrote yesterday or earlier in the week, and then I post it and I get off. or my assistant is distributing content, or she's posting to my story of things about, that's going on in my business. But I don't owe that explanation to anyone, neither do you. Like, I don't need to explain to someone, hey, I know I haven't answered you, and you saw that I posted on social 4 times. Well, that's because my business is set up to run fucking efficiently. Like, I don't owe that explanation to someone, because they then assume that must mean I'm ignoring them and I'm just all over the internet. And again, so what if somebody is? That's one of the things I put into play a long time ago. Is I got sick of half-assing responses. It really started with my clients, where I was like, I am not going to half-ass their responses. My clients are very aware of the fact that if I am not able to give them my actual attention, I will not respond to their message. I will not open their email. I will not even get on our phone calls. That doesn't happen very often because I'm pretty prepared for those. But if I was to be in a really bad mental state, I would tell them I can't do our call today, because I'm not going to half-ass or not show up for them. I do the same. Then I started integrating that into my personal life. Like, I won't open your message until I actually have the true capacity to fucking read it and respond with the respect and the time and the attention that you deserve. Again, I shouldn't have to explain that to anyone, but I find myself doing that from time to time because people are like, well, you didn't answer me. I didn't have fucking opportunity to answer you yet. And I didn't want to open it and first of all, open it and then not answer because shit, other things happened and I forgot. But then also open it and then give you some half-ass, not real response. Like, that's shitty, and I don't want to do that. I want to show up for people in my life. Like, it's important to show up for people in my life. So when you start to do that and explain that, again, you're setting a different standard, but dude, it's so much more rewarding for you, and the people in your life will start to recognize and understand. And that's that. And don't apologize. That's the other part. I have to catch myself from saying, I'm sorry I didn't answer before. No, I'm not sorry I didn't answer before. It was intentional, and I did that on purpose in some cases. Some cases I do just forget because I'm a human and that happens. But, and then sometimes if I do just forget, I'll apologize. But I just want to show all these examples to you because I think it's important that we bring these into different perspectives and we realize, oh shit, okay, like maybe I do expect that of someone. I didn't even realize it. Or hey, maybe this person does make me feel like shit all the time because they're passive aggressive making comments about, oh, I saw you liked this post, but you couldn't respond to my message. I'm sorry, who are you? My fucking mom? Like, no, that is so rude and out of line, right? But I hope that this is explaining maybe some things for us to behave differently around, our expectations being a little different, So here's the question I always get. But what if something's wrong? Okay. What if something's wrong? True. Valid point. I remember a million years ago, it feels like a million years ago, but we were like teenagers. And I was sitting on the deck with my friend Chrissy and her mom. I don't remember who else was there, but we were talking about somebody getting mad because they didn't answer the phone or something like that, or how she left her phone at in the condo when we went out on the boat all day or something. And her mom looked at us and all of her wisdom and was like, bad news will always find you. And I was like, isn't that the fucking truth, right? Like, if something is wrong, they will find you. Like, someone will find you, will get a hold of you, you will know. That is the case. 9 times out of 10, that, oh my God, it's an emergency message isn't an emergency. It's not at all. In helping people learn, how to communicate with you in a different way is really helps them and you. But as far as that, like, what if something's wrong? 9 times out of 10, those messages you're getting on Facebook aren't an emergency. Nothing is on fire. I'll tell you what, unless you are an EMT, a firefighter, a police officer, a lawyer, a doctor, a nurse. Those are some of the instances. But even then, nurses, doctors, you're not getting messages on fucking Facebook. Like, if something's wrong, you're going to get a phone call. You're going to get multiple phone calls, multiple text messages. And then that's a whole different story, right? But like, it's such a great validation for us but something was wrong and I got to answer and be the savior. And it's like, dude, no, nothing was wrong. And then you just disrupted your own peace and also didn't give that person the attention. And then now maybe you're resentful to them because it really wasn't an emergency, blah, 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 blah. It feeds all of these other pieces of our ego. And It's just not healthy, because the truth is, you guys, as human beings, especially human beings who are wanting to be better and more present and healthy and mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, taking care of the things that need to be taken care of so that they can have all of the free time in the world, right? We need space. We need space. How many times have you sat down and started it on social media or started it on your text messages and 4 fucking hours go by and then you're drained and you're like, what the hell just happened? It will suck you in. And sometimes that's okay if it's intentional. But there's a very big lack of people accepting or understanding that alone time and space and detachment from your device and from all of the conversations is so necessary for you to be the best version of you, for you to be the best kind of friend, the best kind of coach, the best kind of boss, the best kind of husband or wife, sister, mom, any of those things. Like, being able to give yourself the space and knowing that it is okay that you do that. It is imperative that you do that. And your phone is going to be fine. Everything will still be there at the end of the day. I'm going to give you a couple of tips as far as starting to work on the actual distraction piece of your cell phone. So I want to remind you that I run a virtual business. My clients are spread across the world. Right now, everybody is in America, but most of the time they're spread all over. And I use a few different apps. Like, my clients communicate with me on Voxer. If there's an emergency, they'll send me a text and say, hey, I have a big problem. I sent you a message on Voxer. Okay. So then I'll go check Voxer. Or they'll say, I'm having an emergency. Can I call you? Here's the deal. Don't be the boy that cried wolf, though. Like, if it's not an emergency, don't pull that bullshit with me, because it'll only happen once, right? But those boundaries are firm. They know. Okay. I also have strict business hours where I have to adhere to it more than my clients do. My clients can message me on Voxer anytime they want to, because I don't have notifications on. Okay. And guess what? That's okay. I'm not being paid to be at their beck and call. Trust me, that would cost like 4 times what it costs to have me as a coach if you want me to be available to you 24/7. Like, I might be down for that, for the dollars, for the right price, but no, anyway, I'm kidding. But having no notifications on, and then also them knowing that I check Voxer 2 times a day, but I have to keep my boundary of that I don't answer messages before 10 a.m. and I don't answer messages after 7 p.m. So that's on me. If I don't do my stuff during that time frame, then I can't, if I go against my word, then it unestablishes every boundary that I've created with them on communication. And guess what? Everyone's taken care of, and they're more than taken care of all the time. I've never had an issue with someone feeling like they weren't supported. I also run an internet-based business where the majority of my sales come directly through Facebook Messenger. People message me and they're like, I'm ready, let's do this. Or they go to my website and send a message, or whatever it might be. I don't have notifications on for Messenger either. I check it once or twice a day, and that's it. And that's okay too. Nothing bad has ever happened. It's all good. Instagram, I have no notifications on for that either. I go in and check my messages and respond when I can. My Instagram inbox is a little crazy. But again, you can't let this shit run your life. You can't, because it runs you. Here's the other thing. Here's the kicker that freaks everyone out. I get 0 notifications for text messages. Here's what I mean by that. Unless you're Tony, which is my boyfriend, and you text me, nothing pops up. I get no ding. Like, there's nothing. And that's because I know me. Sometimes I get sucked in times that I can't be sucked in because I have other things that need to be done, or I need the time and space, right? Like, so that I can function properly within the rest of my life and feel good and be the best version of me. So I have no notifications for that either. I do check my messages, at least once an hour probably, unless I'm in the middle of a project and then my phone's in the other room and I check it whenever I want, like whenever I can. But I usually don't. My friends know if there's something wrong, they'll call. And here's the kicker on that. I have a list, and every phone does this. I'm not an iPhone user. I'm an Android user, but I spoke to some of my friends who have Android or who have iPhones to make sure that this was a capability there too, and it is. But you can set up do not disturb list on your phone, or you can set up do not disturb on your phone to where with two rules. One, anyone on your favorites list will ring through when they call you. Number two, if anyone calls your phone more than once in a row, it'll ring through. So again, back to bad news will find you guys. Like, somebody's going to call your phone more than once if there's something wrong, and it's going to ring through. But other than that, my phone doesn't ring. So on my do not disturb list is like my few best friends who, again, don't call me unless they need something usually. And my parents, my brother and his wife, my boyfriend and his son, because his son lives with him, and Tony does really dangerous things a lot. And so I'm like, if Christian calls, I need to know. Like, something's wrong. So anyways, those are the people there. And now, granted, maybe I'm waiting for a call for someone. I'll add them to my favorites list for the day so that I don't miss the call, But that is the way I've operated for a really long time. A really long time. I have no notifications on for apps at all, other than the one that tells me to water my plants. And then that's just the truth. And when I say that to people, they're like, whoa, are you serious? And when I hear people, especially those who own a business, that tell me that they have their notifications on, I'm like, bro, you are missing out on having more structure and stability in your situation. Because, man, I'll tell you what. And I know that not every person can turn off their phone calls like I can. Like my boyfriend's company, everyone calls his cell phone to schedule their work. He can't do it. He's very jealous of the fact that I can do that. So I know that that extreme is not okay with everyone. But the notifications for social media specifically there's no emergencies happening. I promise. So when I say the notifications are off, I mean no sounds, no pop-ups, nothing. Like I have to go open the app to see if there's something there. And there's an adjustment period when this becomes a thing. I've used an app called App Detox on my phone to help me with the number of unlocks or the amount of minutes used on a certain app, certain times of the day to not use the apps, just because there is that attachment piece. And I think if we aren't willing to admit that, we're doing ourselves a disservice, because it's definitely a thing across the board for everyone I know, for the most part, I should say. And using that, so if you go into the App Store, I know that it's available on Android and iBox, iPhones, and it's called App Detox. It's a green icon, and the inside of the icon is a little, it looks like a little needle, like a shot, like you would get at the doctor. That's one to use. And then there's another one called Quality Time that has a blue clock on it. Quality Time I use just to lock myself out of my whole phone sometimes, to where it'll ring if somebody calls from my list, but that's it. So I can't, if I'm finding myself, doing the procrastination game and continuously opening my phone, because we all do that. So those are some tips that you could really do as far as logistically separating yourself from the constant grind of responding and being in that, the constant pull. Because when you hear the ding, sometimes it's difficult for us to ignore, to not go look and see what's going on. And I just highly suggest it. The freedom that comes from everything I just said to you is incredible. And then it also holds you accountable, man. You have to be on your shit. It really creates almost like a rule for you to be available when you're available, and to answer, during specific times and be responsive during specific times. And it just feels different, and it's really, really, really good and rewarding. So I'll put the name of all those apps down in the show notes for you to check out. The last thing I wanted to say about this is that, again, don't feel stupid and bad. I hope none of this pissed you off. If it did, there's probably a reason. So do a little digging within yourself of why this pisses you off. And just know that, I'm not saying anything that's unrealistic. Trust, again, I work with people in all different industries, all different walks of life. And this is a thing across the board. And I have people talk to me about these instances within their lives, and then I've had it happen to me. all of that. So just remember, at the end of the day, your experience, your reality is not the same as someone else's. So for you to expect them to be 100% on your schedule is unrealistic, and quite honestly, it's rude. It really is. Like, it is not you don't have a right to request those things. I think that there's a deeper conversation, which is what I'm going to wrap up with here, around expectations. And I think it's okay for someone to tell me like, hey, this is my expectation and this is my boundary. And then it's okay for me to say, hey, I respect that and I hear you, but I can't promise that I'm going to meet that expectation because it butts up against my boundary. And I'm not going to, feel guilty if I can't meet your expectation because I'm trying to meet my own. You know what I'm saying? And then there's that space for compromise. But this comes in a place of being able to communicate with others in a different way than I think most of us do. It comes from a place of owning, though, like owning your space and the fact that you're a priority too. Like, you taking care of you is a priority, and it's okay for you to say and do these things. All of the things that I just described to you is the reason why I believe that as a culture, we need to learn how to compassionately communicate and be direct with what we want. And what I mean by that is, I don't mean like, I want this, fuck off. Like, if you don't give this to me, that's that. No. I mean saying, hey, instead of being like, hey, what's up, in a text message, and then when the person's like, nothing, what are you doing? And then they're like, oh my God, I have this huge problem, and they like fucking word vomit it all over you, and you're like, whoa, I was not ready for that. Like, holy crap, I'm literally just like in the elevator. I was just responding really quickly. I have no capacity for this right now. Instead of doing that freaking dance around the bush bullshit, be direct. Say, hey, I really need to vent to somebody right now. Do you have a minute? And then that friend would say, hey, I hear you. I don't have a minute. Is everything okay? Or can I call you later? And then that's the moment where the person's either like, no, I'm not okay. And then you make an exception. Or they're like, yes, that's totally cool. Call me later. My friend Catherine and I have a perfect example of this type of relationship. So Catherine has always lived at least 10 hours away from me. Since we met, and she's one of my best friends, but we have such a beautiful relationship to the fact where like she can say, hey, I have this thing. It's kind of ugly. It's kind of heavy. Can you talk about it right now? Or do you have the capacity for it right now? Or can I send it here and you can just read it later? Like those types of things. Like I'll tell her, hey, I'm going to send you something over on Facebook Messenger just because I need to get it out. You don't even need to look at it. And she's like, okay. Or she tells me, hey, I just need to ask you that. Can I ask you this? Or can I ask if I'm being petty? Or can I ask if I'm being bitchy? Or whatever. And I'm like, sure, go ahead. And then there are some times where both of us are like, no, I can't right now. Like, I'm not mentally available for that right now. It's been a heavy day. I'm exhausted, blah, blah, blah. And then there are also instances where we reach out to each other like that and shit is bad and we do need the other person. And so even if I'm not totally in the zone for that, but she needs me, I'll stop and be there for her because I know that that's our agreement, right? It's not a constant like, I need you to do this. We're so respectful of each other's time, but also of each other's mental state and capacity to show up. And that is a beautiful thing, okay? And I don't know that everyone is capable of having that sort of friendship. My hope is that everyone is, but I'm just using that as an example because I'll tell you what, like, if we're more direct with what we're looking for instead of baiting or beating around the bush, like we're going to get what we want from what we're looking for from a friendship instead of, whatever, say, hey, like I really miss our chats. Do you have time to talk this week? Instead of being like, oh my God, well, I guess we're not friends. There's just this like really passive aggressive fucking nonsense that we pull out. And some of the people that I feel like are even some of the most like mature humans I know pull that. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I just think it's a lack of this type of communication and conversation, honestly. So basically my whole point there is that we can lean into being more direct and also then being direct of what we're looking for and clear of what we're looking for, but also accepting that we cannot expect that person to show up every single time and meet us there every single time. Like, that's unrealistic and it's rude. So we just have to respect each other more and know that just because we all have phones doesn't mean that means we're readily available for anyone at any time that they so choose. So that is my message. I hope that this was helpful. If you enjoyed it, let me know. Leave a comment below. Share this with somebody that you think could benefit from it. I think everyone needs to hear this message as far as I'm concerned. Anyone who owns a cell phone, at least, So if you feel so inclined to share, I always appreciate that. That's definitely one of those things that, like, that's the way we get the message out there, guys. And that's the way we continue to spread the word and help everybody evolve and elevate and be better, is by sharing this message to get it in front of as many people as you can or we can. So I appreciate those of you who do that, and I appreciate it if you do it now. I love that. If you have not already, I would love it if you went over to iTunes or wherever I think iTunes might be the only place actually that allows comments, and leave a review. Leave a review of the broadcast, of the podcast in general. That helps us get ratings. Like, this is not something that's paid for. Like, this is something that I operate and do. Like, the cost of producing the podcast comes straight out of, my pockets. And so having those reviews really helps us get more reach and really helps us get more recognition. And so I really appreciate that. If you feel called to it, obviously no pressure, but I would appreciate those few minutes of your time for sure. As always, if you have any questions about this, shoot me an email. My email is listed below. And thank you. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day, guys. See ya.